The four-firm concentration ratio for the wireless market turns out in the United Kingdom to be 93%. In the United States, 89%. Lower than almost every other one of the developed countries where it is commonly 100%. Or in other words, there's only a single firm in the market. Why is that so? Simply put, there are multiple providers of the same service in the United States. Now, more importantly, look at the revenue per minute earned in those same developed countries. You'll notice that the revenue per minute earned by telecommunications companies in the United States is very low compared with all of the other countries. Why would the revenue per minute be so much higher in the other countries? The answer is the other countries don't have any competition in the wireless market. Competition is the key. The other countries have one cell provider and their rates are sky high. You'll find that cell phone usage, in terms of average minutes of use, is much higher in the United States than in all those countries with monopoly providers. The cost to customers is lower in the United States relative to the other OECD countries, and that allows U.S. citizens to use their mobiles much more heavily and less expensively. What percentage of the population has access to mobiles? It's far highest in the UK and the US, where there's competition in wireless. So where there's competition for wireless service, there are lower prices for consumers, there's more cell phone usage, and there's greater wireless penetration. Is there any doubt consumers benefit from competition? Next, we'll take a look at problems and policies in wireless regulation. The United States would probably be even more competitive in our market structure if we had fewer wireless regulations. When a government makes regulatory decisions to de facto grant monopolies, they're actually creating rents for some companies. Rents are a reduction in competitive intensity. When the government grants a monopoly, that monopoly can raise prices and reduce quantities of the service supplied. Remember the OECD countries and the evidence about their wireless provision? In a competitive market, there's no rent seeking. Special considerations are unavailable because regulations are unable to constrain the firms. Each firm will try to best the other's prices until finally they're operating at just above the cost of actually producing the service. Uneconomic firms will be forced to leave the industry. In the country that had more firms producing wireless, what happened to the price of wireless? The prices were the lowest in the country that had the most firms producing wireless. It was also the case that more people used wireless in the country that had more firms producing wireless, and it was also the case that available revenues and probably profits were lower in those countries, the UK and the United States. Firms will naturally attempt to capture special consideration through regulation for themselves rather than competing. It's easier than competing. One way to do that in the United States is to go to Washington. In other countries, you could go to whatever governmental agency runs wireless in your particular country and lobby for some special provision. A special provision will probably limit the number of companies that are in the industry, or it will limit the prices they charge. It could also limit the frequencies that they operate on. It's legal in most countries to lobby for special regulatory consideration. But what eventually happens in situations like this is that seeking special consideration actually becomes more important to the industry than the production of their wireless service. There are immense social costs to having regulation in terms of special considerations. And that's true in the wireless area and just as true in other regulatory areas. A massive amount of effort is expended each year by wireless firms to lobby for special considerations, effort that could have been better spent in providing the actual services and devices. That brings us to the opinion that economists have regarding wireless provision. Who's having a more transparent and competitive spectrum going to benefit? It's going to benefit consumers. It will benefit consumers in lower prices, and it will benefit consumers in increased access to wireless. It also benefits consumers in terms of lower excess telecommunications industry profits that consumers will ultimately have to pay. The evidence is clear. But it's also the case that the beneficiaries of greater regulation and less market activity are politicians and the few firms that receive the special consideration. If they benefit from greater regulation, you can imagine that they are going to want even more regulation in the future. Be very wary when politicians tell you that regulation is going to be necessary in the wireless arena, as they, the politicians, and a few firms, are probably going to be receiving most of the rents.